Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started. The Taliban have been in power for more than 50 days now. Their so-called 2.0 version is proving to be eerily similar to 1.0. They were terrorists and they remain so. But now with government designations legitimized by the West, that is what has changed. And they're not even pretending to keep their promises. We've been telling you how they're curbing the rights of Afghan women. Tonight we'll show you how they're targeting and killing minorities, religious minorities, like Sikhs and Hindus, ethnic minorities like the Hazaras. Sikh shrines in Afghanistan are being vandalized, raiders who plundered Hindu temples are being glorified, and Hazaras are being massacred. Tonight, we'll show you images and videos of the Taliban and how they're perpetrating this horror. Also on the show, it's raining drones in China. A drone show turned into a fiasco when the man who controls messed up. It can be said about the whole country, we say. We'll tell you how the man with the controls in China is messing up. India is calling out Britain's vaccine discrimination and paying back in the same coin. In the latest move, the Indian hockey team has pulled out of the Commonwealth Games. The CIA confirms it is losing spies. They're being captured, killed and compromised. And should clean environment be made a human right? There's a proposal at the UN. Guess who is opposing it? America and Britain, among others, who claim to be the biggest climate champions. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
Z Entertainment Enterprises founder Dr. Subhash Chandra has questioned the intention of American investor firm Invesco behind seeking an extraordinary general meeting of the company. Dr. Subhash Chandra has said the proposed Zeal-Sony merger plan was in the best interest of all shareholders and has asked Invesco to reveal the credentials of the 6 members it wants on the board. Germany's Benjamin List and David Macmillan from the US have won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for their development of a precise new tool for molecular construction. As tensions hit a new high between Taipei and Beijing, the Taiwan defense minister says that Taiwan fears Chinese invasion by 2025, calling the tensions the worst in 4 decades. Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden has said he has spoken to Chinese President Xi Jinping about Taiwan, and they agreed to abide by the Taiwan Agreement. Hours after a Facebook whistleblower testified before US lawmakers, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg broke his silence, saying that the claim that the company puts profit over safety is just not true. The Washington National Cathedral marked the grim milestone of 700,000 American deaths due to COVID-19 by tolling its bell 700 times, once for every 1,000 deaths. Climate demonstrators invaded a fashion show in Paris, slamming the industry's impact on the environment. An unprecedented sandstorm has engulfed Brazilian cities, leading to low visibility and traffic disruptions. A Russian actress and a film director have arrived at the International Space Station to shoot the first movie in space. England are set to greenlight their Ashes tour of Australia after receiving assurances over quarantine rules for families and off-field restrictions. England's players have been involved in positive discussions with Cricket Australia over the last 2 days, and Captain Joe Root and other senior players have now reportedly committed to the tour after initial hesitation. The ECB will formally announce its decision later this week. India has completed a historic clean sweep of the International Hockey Federation's annual awards. Harmanpreet Singh was named the Men's Player of the Year, B.R. Srijesh Goalkeeper of the Year, and Graham Reed Coach of the Year for their roles in the men's team, returning to the Olympic podium for the first time since 1980. Gurjit Kaur won the Women's Player of the Year award, Savita Punia Keeper of the Year, and Shord Marina the Women's Coach of the Year.
Our cover story tonight is technically not even news. That's because we're telling you how the Taliban are just being themselves. If you expected them to be any different, then I'm sorry to break it to you, they're still a terrorist group pretending to be the government. They're doing everything they should not be doing, like setting up a squad of suicide bombers. That's their USP after all. They're also going after the minorities of Afghanistan, Sikhs, Hindus and Hazaras. They're all being hunted. There are reports of violent attacks and mass killings. Places of worship are being vandalized. Last evening, the Sikhs were targeted. Their main shrine in Kabul was attacked. Take a look at these pictures. These are Talib storming into Gurudwara Karte Parwan. They're heavily armed. They easily overpower the 2 security guards stationed here. They smash at least 10 CCTV cameras, perhaps to make sure that their faces are not captured, but they miss one. And that's the camera which captured this attack. It captured the video you're watching. You see Talib searching for something inside this office in Gurudwara, and this is not the only video of the incident. We have another one. We haven't been able to verify its authenticity, but it's going viral on social media platforms. This video shows a man conducting a survey of the Gurudwara after the Taliban left.
जिथे सारी रिकॉर्डिंग होंगी इतना दा ताला भी तोड़ेंगे इतना दा ताला भी तोड़ेंगे जो गुरगैन से बूटा दे नाल में चले गए अंदर
एक कैमरा भी टूटा हुआ है सब कुछ वो काट के सब तोड़ दिया एक कैमरा भी टूट गया
This is a sorry state of minorities in Afghanistan. Is this the inclusivity that the Taliban promised? They vandalize shrines and justify their actions. In this case, you won't believe what they've said in their defense. The Taliban, after doing what you saw they did, claim that they were there to protect the Gurudwara. Our correspondent in Kabul, Anas Malik, visited the shrine today. He sent us his ground report.
I'm standing outside the Gurudwara Guru Singh Sahiba in Kabul's Karte Parwan area. This is the entrance to the main Gurudwara, where yesterday we saw a heavy deployment or a heavy influx of Taliban men who had forcefully entered the Gurudwara premises yesterday and then vandalized the CCTV cameras. They had violated the sanctity of the property itself by forcefully entering. A Taliban spokesperson is yet to comment on the matter. We saw them being here for about 4 to 6 hours. We saw it with our own eyes. And the Taliban men outside, they gave the reasoning that they were here in order to quote-unquote protect the property. But this was the first since the Taliban takeover.
The Taliban don't care about minorities. That's very clear. Look at this post. It is from Anas Haqqani. He's a Taliban leader, and this is what he says. Today, we visited the shrine of Sultan Mahmud Ghaznavi, a renowned Muslim warrior and mujahid of the 10th century. Ghaznavi established a strong Muslim rule in the region from Ghazni and smashed the idol of Somnath. This man, Ghaznavi, was the first independent ruler of the Turkic dynasty. He attacked the Somnath temple in the state of Gujarat, not once, Not twice, but several times, he looted and plundered this temple. And today, Anas Haqqani is using his memory to insult Hindus in India. This is how brazen the Taliban is in its contempt for minorities, and not just Hindus and Sikhs. Ethnic minorities like the Hazaras are also living in fear in Afghanistan. The Taliban are attacking them. Soon after they took power in August, the Taliban went looking for members of Afghan forces. They were in the Daikundi province on the 30th of August. 13 ethnic Hazaras were rounded up. The Taliban killed all of them. 11 victims were former members of the Afghan forces. 2 were civilians. One of them was a 17-year-old girl. All of them killed in cold blood. And such mass killing of the Hazaras is a Taliban speciality, we can tell you. In July, they massacred 9 Hazara men. This happened in Ghazni soon after the Taliban took control of this province. Then the details are disturbing. We are going to advise viewer discretion before we tell you what they did. Out of the 9 victims, 6 men were shot dead. 3 others were tortured to death, one of them strangled with his own scarf. Then the Taliban sliced off his arm muscles. It's barbaric, and it continues. In central Afghanistan, around 700 Hazara families were forced to leave their homes. The Taliban issued eviction orders. They gave these families 9 days to leave. Who is going to take their place? Pashtuns, the group that makes up most of the Taliban. Reports say the Taliban are rewarding their fighters by throwing thousands of Hazaras out of their homes. Long story short, this is the opposite of inclusivity. The Taliban have no intention whatsoever of protecting minorities, and the world already knows this. The problem is they won't do very much. They can't. So they're treating these terrorists with kid gloves. Let me show you how the European Union, for instance, described the Taliban's crimes in September. They said the provincial government in Afghanistan has, quote-unquote, fallen short of its promises. The Taliban are on a killing spree. They're committing human rights violations, and all the European Union can come up with is that they're falling short of promises. The policy of engaging with the Taliban was always flawed. We've always said this, and it is backfiring already. 50 days. This policy is allowing a terror regime to get away with heinous crimes. And speaking of heinous crimes, what's the one thing that China is good at? Propaganda, I would say. It's a strategy that keeps changing and evolving. The old hammer and sickle are out. The new favorites are drones. You can see drone shows like this one in every Chinese city. It's the new craze, lighting up the night sky with symbols or names or cartoons. It looks good when it comes off. But last Friday, things went south. It was raining drones in the city of Zhengzhou. And I mean literally. Just see for yourself, 200 drones flying in formation. Out of nowhere, they started crashing to the ground. You can imagine what happened next. Absolute panic. Onlookers began running for cover. Drones were hitting cars and trees, as if acid rain and dust storms were not enough. Chinese citizens are now ducking drones. What caused this drone Armageddon? Chinese media is calling it an operations error. In other words, the guy with the remote control messed up. You could say that for the whole country, the guy with the remote control messing up royally. And that's Xi Jinping. His debt crisis is expanding. It is going beyond Evergrande. On Monday, a major Chinese developer missed its dues. It's called Fantasia. They're a luxury apartment developer based in Shenzhen. They missed 2 key payments, $206 million to bondholders, $108 million in company loans. Both S&P and Moody's have downgraded their ratings to quote-unquote default. Clearly, Beijing's strategy is failing. They cannot control the fallout from Evergrande. It is spreading to other firms, to other sectors. How long before the whole Chinese economy is hit? This crisis should be Xi Jinping's only priority. Unfortunately, expansionism is a full-time job, so Xi Jinping does not have time for distractions like recessions and power outages. He's busy sending jets into Taiwan. Guess how many? 149 in 4 days, 149 incursions into Taiwan's air defense zone. Tensions have not been this high in 4 decades. So the obvious question is this: is this war? Well, Taiwan doesn't think so. Their defense minister says Beijing will invade, not now, but in 2025.
Speaking about invading Taiwan, China does currently possess such capabilities, but we must consider the consequences. We don't want to take any provocative actions, but if we irritate them, it is like irritating a person. A person would employ everything at hand when irritated. So following our judgments, the year 2025 is the year they will have more comprehensive capabilities.
So Taiwan has less than 4 years to prepare itself. A lot will depend on the United States, their #1 ally. On Tuesday, Joe Biden reaffirmed his position on Taiwan. He asked Xi Jinping to abide by what he called the Taiwan Agreement. Listen in.
Well, I've spoken with Xi about Taiwan. We agree we'll abide by the Taiwan Agreement. That's where we are. And we made it clear that I don't think he should be doing anything other than abiding by the agreement.
What exactly is the Taiwan Agreement? Well, there isn't one. Biden was probably talking about America's long-standing policy. It's called the Taiwan Relations Act. What does it say? It says the US will recognize Beijing instead of Taipei, but on one condition, that Taiwan's future will be resolved peacefully. Now, the problem is that this is an American law. It is not binding on China. But then again, which laws are binding on China? The Taiwan Relations Act is sacred for the US. It is not for Beijing. Or else they wouldn't be sending 149 jets into Taiwan. Biden's first response at this point is diplomacy. He dispatched his national security advisor to meet Chinese diplomat Yang Jiechi. They met in Zurich, neutral ground for both sides. Joe Biden's wish list is clear here. He wants guidelines, rules to govern the competition between the US and China in this region. The talks are welcome. But how invested are the Chinese? Their last meeting was in Alaska in the month of March. It was less of a summit, more of a shouting contest. Reports say this one was not as dramatic. But setting those guidelines is not going to be easy. China is plotting invasions in the middle of a financial crisis. This is a country that has made up its mind. Not just on Taiwan, China seems to have made up its mind on India too. Tension at the border is growing. The Chinese military is attempting fresh incursions. It is engaging in ceasefire violations. Military commanders from India and China will meet this month for the 13th time. So far, their dialogue has failed to produce any results. Looks like India now wants to pressurize China militarily for a solution. Just before the talks, India has redirected soldiers and military assets from Pakistan to China. Our next report has all the details.
Even after 17 months and 12 rounds of talks, tensions at the India-China border haven't calmed. In fact, they are growing. Both India and China have ramped up deployments. The Indian forces have redirected significant military assets from the front with Pakistan. French-made Rafale jets, field guns, tanks, and howitzers have been positioned along the border with China. India is now believed to have around 200,000 troops on this front. This is a 40% increase in deployment from last year. It is a necessity. The Indian army is trying to match China toe-to-toe.
Definitely there has been an increase in their deployment in the forward areas, which remains, of course, a matter of concern for us. But we are regularly monitoring all their movements, and based on whatever inputs we get, we are also carrying out matching developments both in infrastructure as well in terms of the troops that are needed to counter any threat.
Recently, the Chinese military installed more advanced equipment on the border, including a multiple rocket launcher. They are now conducting night drills. The Chinese Air Force is stationed across the line of control. The Indian Air Force is watching the PLA too.
With respect to the development of airfields by the FLAF in the TAR region, what we have to keep in mind that though the airfields are being developed, hardened aircraft shelters are being built there, but they have a huge penalty of high altitude. So their capability to be able to launch multiple missions from high altitude airfield will remain a weak area for them.
The skies may be a weakness for the Chinese forces, But the PLA is keeping tensions at the border alive with fresh provocations. China has violated the ceasefire twice in the last 10 days. The Chinese military is engaging in fresh infiltration bids. The most significant one happened in Uttarakhand. The PLA crossed the line of actual control at Barahoti. More than 100 Chinese troops entered Indian territory. They left after 3 hours. Military commanders from both sides will meet this month. This will be the 13th attempt to end the border standoff. China can use the opportunity to pull its troops back, but it has given no indication that it favors a truce. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
On this show, we've repeatedly talked about China's debt trap too. Simple but sinister stuff. You saddle smaller nations with loans, and when they cannot repay, you colonize them. You take over their strategic assets. Most countries do not see the debt trap coming. They fall into it by accident. Well, Pakistan is not one of them. They know where the trap is. They know what's coming. But they don't seem to care. Pakistan, it seems, has embraced the Chinese debt trap. This is their newest project. It's called the Karachi Coast. Pakistan and China have signed a memorandum of understanding. What does it say? China will invest $3.5 billion in Karachi, $3.5 billion. Where will all of this money go? To 4 major projects. Number 1, adding new berths to the Karachi port. Number 2, a 640-hectare trade zone. Number 3, a new fishing port. And number 4, a harbour bridge that connects the Karachi port to a set of nearby islands. It's a very ambitious plan. Prime Minister Imran Khan thinks he's hit a jackpot. He wrote something on Twitter. Let me read it out for you. This project will clean up our maritime habitat for fishermen, build 20,000 affordable homes, provide great opportunities for investors, and make Karachi one of the most developed coastal cities. It's all very good, but does it sound familiar? A few years back, Pakistan was saying the very same things, not about Karachi, but about Gwadar. Gwadar was supposed to be the game changer then, the big ticket project of China, of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Well, it's not anymore. China has picked Karachi over Gwadar, and I'll tell you why I say this. Reason number 1, Gwadar was becoming a security problem. The port project did not have local support. There were protests against Chinese influence, even attacks. In August, suicide bombers targeted a Chinese convoy in the region. 1 Chinese national was killed. Reason number 2, Karachi is a safer bet. There is no insurgency in Karachi, plus it's already a prominent business center. That's less risk and more returns. It's a no-brainer for China. But where does that leave Gwadar? In no man's land. Foreign investment is already drying up. Saudi Arabia, for one, was planning to build a $10 billion refinery in Gwadar. They're not anymore. In June, they shifted that project to Karachi. The bottom line is this. Foreign money is disappearing from Gwadar, but the Chinese lease will not disappear. The Gwadar port has been leased to China for 43 years. That's until 2059. So what message is China trying to send here? They're trying to tell Pakistan that Gwadar is disposable. And for that matter, any Chinese promise is disposable. Countries with self-respect would question Beijing on this. You promised to deliver Gwadar, now you live up to that promise. But Pakistan won't do that. They have voluntarily gone from one debt trap to another. It's an open invitation to colonize. How should India see this development? For starters, Karachi is closer to India. Any Chinese presence should be watched closely because trade is not the only thing that happens at Chinese ports. There's a lot of espionage. There's a lot of monitoring off the books. Then there is the Taliban factor. Afghanistan, you see, is a landlocked nation. They depend on the Karachi port for trade. And we know the Taliban's biggest export: narcotics, drugs. China does not really care about the drug trade. Their decision is going to be based on money. And here's something else that we must underline. Gwadar is closer to the Malacca Straits. It would have helped China control a key oil trade route. In contrast, Karachi is already a developed port. And this decision is very unlike China. They don't usually hedge their bets. They make high-risk investments. They put strategy over money. This time, they're not doing that. What explains this change in policy? Xi Jinping's Belt and Road is losing steam. That's why they're making the shift. Let me show you some numbers. From 2013 to 2021, Malaysia has cancelled projects worth $11 billion. Kazakhstan has cancelled worth $1.5 billion. Bolivia, $1 billion. Almost 35% of the projects are struggling with corruption, protests and labour violations. Basically, these countries are having buyer's remorse. They want to quit the Belt and Road. And this is a nightmare for China. It means no return on investment, no interest, no repayment. The so-called strategic projects are failing. So what does China do? Abandon them and look for new and more lucrative opportunities, like the Karachi port in Pakistan. The question is, does China have the bank balance to pursue this? Its housing sector is collapsing. It is running out of power, of energy. But Beijing is more worried about expansionism. The Belt and Road is not building a highway to progress. It is building a great wall of debt, both for China and its clients. Now, being a spy is not easy. You live in the shadows, you operate in obscurity, you deceive for a living, you risk your life daily, and no one even gets to know. Everything you do is secretive. But what if those secrets get spilled? What if the spy becomes a double agent? These are questions the CIA is currently dealing with. America's Central Intelligence Agency is losing a troubling number, a worrying number of informants and spies. They're apparently being captured, killed and compromised in very large numbers. Where is this happening? Why is it happening? Who is behind this? What is the impact on the CIA? And how does the CIA plan to deal with this? Our next report explores.
On my way.
CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency. America's first line of defense. And the reason behind its supremacy. The CIA maintains America's position as a superpower. It works to eliminate all threats to its global hegemony. But this empire of information is now facing an existential threat itself. It's losing informants around the world. This is not a revelation, it's an admission. The American media claims to have accessed a top-secret cable which was sent to CIA stations around the world. What does the cable say? A troubling number of CIA recruits and informants are being captured, killed, or compromised. They're being hunted down by adversaries or being turned into double agents. Who are these adversaries? No names have been given. But the CIA considers the intelligence agencies of Russia, China, Iran, and Pakistan as the prime suspects. How exactly are they dismantling the CIA's network? By exploiting its weaknesses. The biggest weakness is placing mission over security, an approach that prioritizes the ends over the means. The cable claims this policy has created a number of challenges that have plagued the agency in recent years, like poor tradecraft or being too trusting of sources, underestimating foreign intel agencies, moving too quickly to recruit informants, and not paying enough attention to potential counterintelligence risks. All these challenges combined are compromising the CIA's capabilities. They also demonstrate the growing prowess of its enemies, which the cable claims have begun mirroring the CIA's techniques. They're said to have aced the same innovations, like biometric scans, facial recognition, artificial intelligence, and hacking tools to track the movement of spies. especially those at the front line. Reports say the warning was primarily aimed at frontline operatives, the people involved in recruiting and vetting of sources, the ones building networks of trusted human informants. The cable has asked them to be more alert in future recruitments and to not underestimate their adversaries at any cost. Former CIA officials say adversaries sitting in Pakistan pose the biggest challenge. They've apparently been the most effective in turning informants into double agents. Pakistan has a record of discovering and breaking the CIA's networks. Time and again, it has arrested Pakistani informants who fed information to the CIA. Now, with America having withdrawn from Afghanistan, the CIA is reportedly finding it even tougher to communicate with its informants in Pakistan. And sustaining a strong network of informants is more important than ever. The CIA has declined to comment on the matter. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Have you heard of the snowball effect? It's when something starts off small, builds up slowly, and then suddenly blows up into something dangerous. Case in point is the India-UK vaccine spat. It started off with Britain not recognizing Covishield. We thought it was a technicality. Covishield is basically AstraZeneca in a different bottle. Surely Britain would change their mind, and they did. They recognized Covishield for travel, but not India's vaccine certificates. So fully vaccinated Indians were asked to quarantine in Britain. What did India say? Two can play at that game. New Delhi imposed retaliatory restrictions on British travellers. Britons visiting India will have to undergo a mandatory quarantine. But the snowball has not stopped yet. It has now gone beyond diplomacy and travel. Sports is the new flashpoint. India is hosting the Men's Junior Hockey World Cup next month. It's a big tournament, but Britain will not be sending a team. Here's what their hockey board says. With a number of COVID-related concerns in place and with player and staff well-being in mind, it has become untenable for our team to participate. We note that on Friday, the Indian government announced a mandatory 10-day quarantine for all UK nationals. So Britain pulled out first, and now India has retaliated. Both the Indian men's and women's team have pulled out of the Commonwealth Games. They're scheduled for July 2020 in Birmingham. So that's far away. Hockey India has given two reasons for the pullout at this point. One, the rising Wuhan virus cases in Britain, and two, the 10-day mandatory quarantine. Here's what the president of Hockey India said. Such discriminatory restrictions were not imposed on Indian athletes and officials during the recent Tokyo Olympic Games, and this 10-day quarantine requirement for vaccinated sportspersons will affect their performance. We feel these restrictions are biased and against India and term it as very unfortunate. He's right. There were no such restrictions at the Tokyo Olympics. They had more than 11,000 athletes in Tokyo. In comparison, only 4,000 athletes attended the last Commonwealth Games. It's a much smaller event. Frankly, they need India's star quotient. Indian hockey is riding a wave of success and popularity. The men's team bagged bronze in Tokyo. The women's team finished fourth. No India means no viewership. But Britain does not seem to care. They're more concerned about stereotyping India. That's what this vaccine spat boils down to, basically. Britain does not have a problem with Covishield. It has a problem with India's certificates. But the Wuhan virus numbers tell a different story. And we have those numbers. Take a look. Britain is reporting 1.3 million active cases. 1.3 million. What about India? 246,000 cases in a country as big as India. Compare that to Britain, 1.3 million. Same with cases per million. Britain has 116,000 cases per million people. India has 24,000. Let's talk vaccination. India has administered nearly 1 billion jabs. Britain's number is 1/10 of that. This is the ground reality. Britain is dealing with a far bigger outbreak than India. Yet Indian citizens are being quarantined and Indian certificates are being questioned. This is not just a diplomatic crisis. This is classic British snobbery. And it's affecting an important bilateral relationship. There are trade agreements to discuss, Indo-Pacific strategies to finalize. This vaccine squabble is an unnecessary distraction. And for the Commonwealth Games, it's a big loss. They could have gained from the renaissance of Indian hockey, added more viewership to their games, only if they abandoned their petty politics and prejudice. Now, here's something we would love to hear your comments on. Should a safe and healthy environment be a human right? That's the question we're asking. The United Nations says yes, it should. We agree. The UN Human Rights Commission is expected to adopt a resolution later this week. The resolution will make access to safe and healthy environment a human right. Reports say most UN member states are in favor of this. As always, there are some who are not. And you'd be surprised which ones. Countries who claim to hold environment closest to their hearts, who claim to be champions of the cause. The United States, for example, the hypocrite in chief, it does not want to make safe environment a human right. Neither does Russia or Brazil or the United Kingdom, the same United Kingdom that is hosting the biggest climate summit this year, the COP26. They don't want clean environment as a human right. And by the way, Boris Johnson has been all about climate of late. He says that humanity is reaching a turning point on climate. Sure it is. And yet he doesn't want clean environment to be a human right. Same with the US. They apparently have legal concerns. What kind of concerns? Recognizing new rights could dilute old ones. That is America's big worry. That is their argument. What do you say to arguments like these? You call them out. You call out the lies and hypocrisy. Climate action makes for a fancy cause, a perfect campaign pitch, an attractive agenda item at summits. It's the politically correct thing to do, to rally for. And that's where it ends, unfortunately. The moment an opportunity comes up to actually do something about it, most leaders would rather not. Take Brazil's Jair Bolsonaro and Russia's Vladimir Putin, for example. Both are opposing the resolution. They say it needs amending. What kind of amending? In how many different ways can you say that a safe and healthy environment is non-negotiable? The fact that it is not a human right already is pretty sad in itself. Say the resolution manages to pass and clean environment does become a human right. What happens then? Will it force governments to clean up the environment? Will car makers be forced to go green? Will factories be forced to switch to renewable energy? Will there be more caps on carbon emission? If history has answers to these questions, the answer would be a big no. Clean environment as a human right in itself will not make the environment clean. Yes, I'm not being pessimistic, I'm just being realistic. You see, we have the right to life, and yet we have genocide in this world. We have the right to health. We also have malnutrition. We have the right to education. We also have 258 million children and youth out of school. So making clean environment a human right is just a means. It is not an end. In fact, the UNHRC has a long list of human rights. It has 30 basic rights, from civil rights to cultural, economic, political, social rights. There is, for example, the right to work in just and favorable conditions. There's also the right to highest attainable standards of physical and mental well-being. The right to rest and leisure, would you believe it? That is a human right. Has the UNHRC been able to protect or ensure these rights? It has not, and you cannot blame them for this. Because this council can only make recommendations. Its resolutions are not binding. So the UNHRC can make clean environment a human right, but it's up to UN member states, countries, governments to protect that right. And this works very differently from rights guaranteed by a country's constitution. In India, for instance, we have 6 fundamental rights, and the government is bound to protect those rights. Citizens can move court when those rights are interfered with. But that is not the case with rights listed by the UN, not unless a country adopts it as part of domestic law. I'll give you an example. In 2010, the United Nations passed a resolution. It was the right to water and sanitation. Soon after this, Tunisia adopted it as part of its law. So now it is binding in Tunisia. But such cases are the exception. The norm is this. We live in a world where many leaders still do not understand the climate emergency. How else do you explain the US and the UK's opposition? Then there are countries which have environmental laws at home, but they're ornamental. Did you know that more than 100 countries already have the right to healthy surroundings? 100. The list includes Russia, the same Russia that does not want clean environment as a human right. There is also Bangladesh in that list. It has a constitutional provision for a healthy environment. What does Bangladesh have? What else it has is the world's fourth most polluted city, that is Dhaka. Even China has a constitutional provision for a healthy environment. It also has smog every year. The right to healthy environment is legally recognized in more than 80% of the United Nations member states. This is either through constitutions, legislations, treaties, or court observations. So environment becoming a human right will definitely help. It will also make it easier for the UN to support states in improving environmental issues, examine their compliance. It will make it easier to pressurize governments to clean the environment. So here's what we say: a clean environment must be declared a human right. It's long overdue. The proposal was first conceived in the 1990s. It still hasn't been passed. 13.7 million people die every year because of air pollution. 13.7 million because of chemical exposure. 91% of the world's population lives in places where the air quality levels exceed safe limits. Clean environment needs willpower. Clean environment needs commitment. Clean environment needs world leaders to walk the talk on campaign promises, to make safe environment a basic human right. It's only time. And from protecting our environment, let's now talk about protecting our children. Recently, the British conducted a study. They bought hundreds of toys and found that nearly half of them are dangerous for children. How dangerous? Some of them could prove to be fatal, says that report. So why are they being sold? And how pervasive is this practice of selling dangerous toys? Here's a report.
The festive season is just around the corner. If you're a parent, chances are your kids will have toys on their wish list. You might end up on an e-commerce website to shop for them. But you may want to avoid buying online this time, especially if you are in the United Kingdom. Nearly half of the toys bought from third-party sellers online are unsafe. That's what a study by the British Toy and Hobby Association, or the BTHA, has found. They randomly bought 255 toys from online marketplaces like Amazon, eBay, AliExpress and Wish. 88% of them were illegal and 48% were unsafe for kids. How unsafe? The report says some of these toys could be fatal. They can choke, strangle, burn, poison and electrocute children. It sounds horrid. And it is. The BTHA is demanding legal intervention to save children from dangerous toys. And they are not alone. Dangerous toys have flooded e-commerce platforms around the world. Last year, the toy industry of Europe conducted its own study. They bought 193 toys online. Almost all of them didn't meet the European safety standards. 76% of the toys were rated dangerous. In the United States, eBay was caught selling dangerous and recalled toys. One of them had dangerous levels of lead. But it was still being sold on eBay in 2020. Bigger online retail giants like Amazon sold dangerous toys too. Like this one that could choke toddlers. The platform had no warning for parents. Convenience and low prices made the global online toy market a $100 billion industry. But by refusing to build any safeguards, the same industry is putting the lives of children at risk. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Here's a question. What's that one thing that every dog parent wants? For their dog to be able to communicate. If not communicate, at least understand what they're being told. Like, get your leash, get your jacket, go off to sleep. But most dogs won't oblige. They recognize their food bowl, yes, but anything beyond that is an ask. You tell the dog to get his rope, he may get the rope. You ask him to get a soft toy next, chances are he will roll his eyes at you. While you may brand it as laziness, experts say the dog may not really understand what you mean when you say, go get the soft toy. While most dogs do follow basic instructions like sit, roll, jump, let's go for a walk, they understand all of that, they don't normally remember names of items or their toys. Well, some Hungarian researchers set out on a mission to look for exceptions. They scoured the world looking for genius dogs, those that could recognize the names of their toys. Do such dogs exist? Yes, they do. Not one, not two, but at least 28 toys is what the dogs were expected to recognize. After 2 years of search, experts found 6 genius dogs. Some could remember names of up to 100 toys. I'm not making this up. Tonight, we are going to introduce you to these furry geniuses. First of all, you have Mr. Squall. He's from Florida, 4 years old, loves doing nose work, and has the jaws of a crocodile. Then we have Gaia from Brazil. She's all of 2 and owns more than 80 toys, 80. Rico is from Spain. He's 4, and his mission in life is to go up and down the stairs, we're told. He's quite a poser, as you can see. Then there is Whiskey from Norway, the Einstein of the dog planet. All of 6. When the researchers found her, Whiskey knew the names of 64 dog toys. Today she knows the names of 100. Then you have Max. He's from Hungary and he's the youngest member of the Genius Club. Max was just 7 months old when researchers found him. Look at him. He clearly loves sticking his tongue out. And finally, we have Nalini from the Netherlands. She suffers from severe epileptic seizures, but that does not prevent her from being a genius. She knows the names of 85 different toys. Researchers enlisted her and the other 5 geniuses in a series of live stream contests. They called it the Genius Dog Challenge. In the first stage, the dogs received a box of 6 toys. They had 6 days to learn the names. Then they had to take a test. Watch.
The next toy that we're going to send, guys, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. So the next toy is going to be silver. 3, 2, 1. Send your dogs.
Silver. Silver. Silver.
Ja, så flink. Så flink. Ja, godt jobba. Ja, godt jobba.
Silver. Silver. Correcto. Silver.
Godt jobba.
Correcto, silver. Bien. Muy bien.
In the next stage, the dogs had to learn the names of 12 new toys in 6 days. The geniuses learned them effortlessly. Also remember the names when they tested 2 months later. Gaia and Max made it to the contest's finale. How can we not show you a glimpse of that?
The first toy we're going to ask for is Alien, this little elephant. Are you ready? Give me a like. Okay, super. You can send your dogs to Alien in 3, 2, 1, go.
Gaia. Alien. Alien.
Isso, garota! Muito bem! Muito bem!
Amazing! Okay, well done, Gaia. Well done, Max.
While the dogs were all border collies, researchers found that even German shepherds, Pekingese, mini Australian shepherd and a few mixed breeds could also memorize the names of their toys. Now, if you can't get your dog to fetch the squeaky toy or frisbee, it's totally fine. The idea behind the story was not to make you feel bad or your dog feel bad. The idea was to show you that dogs can grasp human language sometimes. They understand words. They have the ability to. So the next time you tell your dog to fetch the frisbee and he stares right back at you, show him what you mean when you say a frisbee. Help him make that association. Perhaps he'll listen. Best of luck, we say. And with that, it's a wrap. Before we go, we'd like to share some news with you. We have been sharing news with you, but this is about Gravitas. Now, you can listen to Gravitas on the go. Gravitas is now available as a podcast. You can catch today's stories in the audio format. You can even check out stories from previous shows. So, where can you listen to Gravitas? Look us up on Spotify and Google Podcasts. And make sure you subscribe. Leaving you with Gravitas images as always. Thanks for watching.
Welcome.